In this set of video tutorials, we will discuss what is EPS or earnings per share. Why this is the most important measure which an analyst or an investor would kind of look at. And when we talk about EPS, they are actually classified into two types. One is the basic EPS and the second is the diluted EPS. Both of them being equally important. So we'll discuss three things in this set of video tutorial. One, what is EPS, why it is so important. Number two, what is the basic EPS, and number three, what is diluted EPS. So when we talk about earnings per share or EPS, basically this is in most common ways represent the profitability of the company on a per share basis. So profitability per share is what is represented by the earnings per share. There are two things which are very important to note. What exactly is this S? S means obviously shares, but are we talking about preferred shares or common shares? So please note that when we are talking about EPS, this is only about common shares. Okay, so this is only about common shares. We never talk about EPS per preferred shares. Okay, second, when we look at the E, that is the earnings, these earnings are the ones which should directly accrue to the common shareholders. So let's kind of look at income statement which starts with sales and goes to cost of goods sold, and then ultimately what we have is the net income. So when we look at this whole income statement, we realize that this net income is what accrues to the shareholders. Now let us look at what could be the formula for earnings per share. So this is the earnings that accrue to the shareholders. So EPS or earnings per share can be defined as net income divided by shares. Now there are two things that we must note. I'll probably modify the numerator as well as the denominator in both cases. We do that first for the numerator. We started by assuming that EPS is only with respect to the common shareholders. Okay, so when we're talking about the numerator in this case, do you think that the net income directly accrues to the common shareholders? Now if there is an existence of a shareholding pattern where shares are of two kinds, one which is common shares and the second we have the preferred shares, out of this net income you need to deduct the preferred dividends first before it actually accrues to the common shareholders. So essentially what we are saying is that if there are two kinds of shareholding patterns, one is common shares and the second one is the preferred shares. Preferred shares are eligible for dividend payouts, and because dividend payouts are given a preference to the preferred shareholders, we need to deduct this first so as to calculate the numerator here at the EPS. So this formula needs to be modified as net income minus the preferred dividends. Now let's talk about the denominator. So obviously when we are talking about common shares, the first modification would be that this needs to be something like common shares. Now let me ask you a situation when we are looking at these set of common shares. Let us assume that there's a company A, and that had a profile of shares of this sort. They had this common shares. At the start of the year they were 100, and at the end of the year they were 200. So which one do you think we will take in the denominator? Should we take as 100 or should we take as 200? Which one we should ideally take? So think about the numerator, how it is earned. Probably the reason of using 100 or 200 or some other measure will be gauged when we look at the numerator first. What happens in the numerator? Numerator is a net income less the preferred dividends, and this net income is earned throughout the year. Okay, so this net income is earned throughout the year. So it's a measure that is giving us a way that this is being earned throughout the year. But what about the common shares? This is at a single point in time. This is at a single point in time. So for common shares as well, we must have a measure which gives us a comparable which is throughout the year. So what we do here is that we kind of don't take the initial one, we don't take the ending one, but we take something called as a weighted average common shares. So those are weighted throughout the year. We'll take an example to look at how this net income minus preferred dividends is calculated, as well as weighted average common shares is calculated in our next video tutorial.